samagaha dhyanavasthita tadgatena manasa pasyanti yam yogino yasyantam na vidusura suraganaha devaya tasmai namaha. We are continuing our discussion on the 13th chapter of this text, Bhagavad Gita, which, as you know, is a small fraction of a much bigger work known as Mahabharata, which has got more than 100,000 verses, going back to the middle of the second millennium BC. And this particular text is an extract from that huge work. It's got 700 verses divided into 18 chapters, dealing with some of the most profound questions of existence, life, God, purpose of life, and so on. I was discussing, in the last session, I was discussing the 25th verse of this text. And this 26th one is Yavar samjayade kinjit sattvam sthavara jangamam kshetra kshetrajna samyoga tad vidhi bharadashava. What it essentially means is there is one supreme divine reality present in everything and everywhere, including the phenomenal world. But then it doesn't mean that all that you see is divine. What it means is behind all these, there is a divine spark as the essence of it. So the whole creation is nothing but a combination or a synthesis of this divine spark and the external elements. Now, the next two verses are very, very profound and very, very celebrated verses. The 27th and 28th, those of you can remember, 13th chapter, the verses 27 and 28. They are very, very famous and frequently quoted. The verse is this: Samam sarveshu bhudeshu tishthandam parameshwaram vinasyasu avinasyantam yapasyadi sapasyadi samam pasyanki sarvatra samavasthidameshwaram nahinasti atmanatmanam tato yadi paramgatim. Those who are coming for this class for the first time, for information, this is an ancient text going back to sometime in the middle of second millennium. It took its present shape around that time. It is in ancient Sanskrit language, the original ancient language in which many of the well-known scriptures of Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, all these religious traditions were written in this particular ancient language, very close to the ancient Zoroastrian language, going. It's considered to be the mother of the Indo-Germanic or Indo-European family of languages. Now, coming back to the text, what this essentially tells you is this: in everything in this world, both in the perishable as well as the imperishable, everything, there is one unchanging supreme reality. Now, one may ask this question: why this particular term is used? Why don't you use the word God? The idea of a monotheistic God is fully accepted. But Vedanta philosophy tells you that at one stage, when you go beyond a particular level of your spiritual evolution, when you reach the perfection in spiritual evolution, then you don't have to go to a temple or a church to feel the presence of God. You open your eyes, everywhere you see the omnipresence, the all-pervading nature of the divine. Again, this is not a concept, not an idea, not just a philosophical concept, but it is a matter of inner experience that we reach as a result of, as a part of our spiritual evolution. This idea behind. So all the rituals, dogmas, philosophical ideas, all are perfectly okay, but they don't represent the highest reach of spirituality. Spirituality in its most sublime form is seeing the same everywhere and seeing the same divinity everywhere. Now, this is a idea. Apparently, one may think it's a high philosophy. Now, it has got a very practical application. That is found in another ancient textbook. It's called Bhagavata. It's actually a book on devotional philosophy. I'm quoting a few verses. Now, the idea that humanity or creation or existence is one spiritual family. In what way does it affect our life, or what is its practical implication? That is clearly stated in another text. It says, Aham sarveshu bhudeshu bhudatma avasthita sada tam avajnaya mam martya kurde archa vidambanam. Is a well-known verse from another text, Bhagavata Purana. Equally ancient. What it says is, very interesting. I am present here. These ideas are put in the mouth of God. God conceived not to be just a creator God, but rather as a divine reality present everywhere. The idea in a created God is perfectly all right, fully understood, but that comes only in one particular intermediate stage of our spiritual growth. When you go beyond, then you don't need to read a book, or you don't need to go to a temple or a church to feel the presence of the divine. You open your eyes, all that you see around becomes a part of the divine. All your actions become sacred, like an act of worship. All the words that we speak become like sacred prayers. Spirituality practically becomes a part of our being, our life. So that is the idea behind. The meaning of this verse is very, very radical, very revolutionary. It's something like that God tells you. He says, I am present in everything. See, aham sarveshu bhudeshu bhudatma avasthita sada means, Bhuda means anything that has come into existence. See, Bhuda is Sanskrit. Bhu is a Sanskrit root, which actually means coming into existence or becoming, happening, and so on. So anything that has come into existence, everywhere. I am that divine present everywhere. Anyone who forgets that, or who neglects this truth, and thinks that I am only present in one place, or I am present only in a book, or in a place of worship, and those who limit my presence, those who limit me to a structure, wooden structure, marble structure, maybe a palatial building, those who think that I am present only here, not outside. So God is somebody who sits in a temple or a church or a synagogue or a Buddhist place of meditation, whatever it is, not outside. Actually, it is an insult to the very idea of God. Insult in this very strong language, but that's what Lord Krishna tells you here. Lord Krishna is the teacher. He says, Tam avajnaya mam martya. One who forgets or neglects or ignores this truth, this all-pervading nature of the divine, if one forgets and thinks that I'm going to a place of worship every week or every day, and I'm performing some rituals, that's the essence of religion. Their worship is fake worship. That's the meaning of the Archa Vidambana, means a kind of pseudo worship or fake worship. Very strong language. So, now remember this idea, it's a kind of spiritual humanism. Means the humanistic idea based on the fact that existence is one from a spiritual perspective. From a technological perspective, from a spiritual perspective, there may be differences, there may be varieties, but from a spiritual perspective, existence of creation is one. So if you accept this, you cannot pollute waters, air, sky. You cannot do any harm to anyone. You practically let's say in more normal language, you become Christ-like or Buddha-like or anything like that. That means for you life itself becomes a spiritual journey. Spirituality is a concept that goes beyond religion. Spirituality is something that affects our life, our thoughts, words, actions, deeds, and our attitude towards people living around us. So that is the practical implication of this great work. I mean, I am present in everything and everywhere, and those who don't understand this and think that I am only present in one place or one tradition, they don't understand the all-pervading nature of the divine. In fact, these verses are quoted together to drive home the importance of this verse, the 27th verse of the Bhagavad Gita. Again it says, Aham sarveshu bhudeshu bhudatmanam kritalayam arhed dhanamanabhyam maitriya abhinnena chakshusha. It's another important verse. So they come one after another in this classical book of spiritual philosophy called Bhagavata Purana. See, Aham sarveshu bhudeshu bhudatmanam kritalayam. God is telling you, I have built a temple for myself, a wonderful temple. Where did God build His temple? In our hearts. In the hearts of the pious, the humble, the pure, those who have compassion, those who are humanistic in their attitude towards others, those who understand that the divine is present everywhere. The divine cannot be limited to one place, to one book, to one kind of rituals or a belief system. The divine is a matter of the spirituality is a matter of our inner experience. And when we experience this, the essence is we all become good human beings. So these are different interpretations of this verse in the commentaries written in Sanskrit. There is another one that's again, these three verses are frequently used to drive home the implication of these 27th and the 28th verses of the 13th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. It tells samam pashyandi sarvatra samavasti, means those who see the same everywhere, those who experience the same everywhere, those who don't see any distinction, differentiation or discrimination, those who don't draw lines of demarcation in terms of culture, language, nationality or whatever it is, belief systems, those who look beyond the lines of demarcation, for them the divine is present everywhere. Again, this is not a matter of faith or belief. A belief is good. In fact, reading these books, thinking of the profound message of these ideas and appreciating its universality and humanism is wonderful. It is necessary, but it is only the beginning of the journey. It is something to be experienced in our life. And then aham uchavachai dravyehi kriyaya utpannaya anaghe naivatushe archida archaya bhutagrama avamaninaha is another very, very famous verse. So again the same classical work. Not from Gita, but from the other work, which are these verses are quoted to drive home the universality of the profoundness of the teaching. What it says, those who perform elaborate rituals. Sometimes you find in Hindu tradition, you find if you go to temples. Remember, it's not decrying or saying that temples and churches are not necessary, but they are essential, they are important, but spirituality goes beyond that. That's what it says. You have to begin your education in the kindergarten, you have to go to primary school, you have to go to a college, city college, but that kindergarten or a primary school is not the end of education. As we transcend these levels, if we go beyond these levels, finally when we reach the higher levels of knowledge and information, we go to university and get PhD. So like that, it says, in spiritual life also there is a gradual evolution, what we call spiritual graduation, so to speak. You may begin with rituals, perfectly okay. You may go to a place of worship, perform certain disciplines, certain belief systems, read prayers, listening to prayers or talks. It's wonderful, absolutely good, because they are needed to equip our mind with great ideas. No doubt about it. You have to begin your spiritual journey somewhere. Just like you have to study, you have to begin your education somewhere. You may go to the kindergarten next year, home may be in a neighborhood. But then you don't end your education there. Then he says, this particular verse, Aham Uchavasai Deveki, a lot of materials. You place before God a lot of things, wonderful, great things, elaborate rituals, maybe spending millions of dollars. But if the worshipper doesn't understand that I am present in all living beings, Bhuta Grama Avamaninaha, what it means, those who insult, those who look down other living beings. So Bhuta doesn't mean human beings alone. It involves even animal kingdom, the plants, the trees, everything. So that's an important term. See, in these three verses which I'm quoting right now, we quote already, the implication is not human beings alone, not even living beings alone, not even animal kingdom, but also the implication goes beyond, it extends beyond the living organisms, plants and trees, mountains and valleys. They are also are not excluded. It doesn't mean that God is a rock or a tree, nothing of the kind. People misunderstand. That's a very important thing. So if you say you should not pollute water because water is divine, water is the expression of the divine, you should not pollute air because air is important. So air is God. No, that's not the implication. What it means is no one can do anything wrong, anything evil, without spiritually damaging himself or herself. That's the idea behind. So spirituality in its most sublime form is just the art of becoming good human beings. So in these verses, Lord Krishna, the teacher, is not asking you to worship him. What he is asking us is to become good human beings. It's a very universal, non-denominational idea of spirituality. That's the implication of the 28th verses also. Samam pasyanki sarvatra samavasthamishram. The one who sees, that's the meaning. Pasyan means the one who sees, one who experiences the presence of the same unchangeable, unchanging, eternal reality, present everywhere, present in everything. Such a person, na hinasti, he never does any harm to anyone. So what is the most visible, the most tangible proof of or sign of spirituality? Non-violence. So this what you call ahimsa. Ahimsa is a term used in the yoga tradition, yoga system, Before you start any of the yoga practices, one should try to get established, at least practice some of these 10 disciplines, it's called. They are technically called ahimsa, satya, asteya, brahmacharya, aparigraha, shaucha, santosha, tapaswadhyaya, sammanithana. So ahimsa means non-violence. That's mentioned here. Ahimsa is not just not doing anything violent. It also means not thinking anything violent, not speaking anything violent, not even contemplating anything that may be harmful to another person. Which a violent contemplation can lead to violent action. So, being established in non-violence is possible only when you see others as non-different from yourself. When we look upon others as distinct and different from ourselves, then we cannot really practice non-violence in its most comprehensive definition. When we see ourselves as the same reality, within ourselves, the same divinity is present everywhere. Such a person cannot do any harm to anyone, cannot hurt anyone, because he sees the same everywhere. There is no otherness. So, that's why the second part of the 28th verse, nahi nasti, means it doesn't do any harm to anyone, doesn't practice violence against anyone or anything. That means the pure, raw humanism is possible only if it is defined and practiced with a spiritual outlook. The idea that whole creation, the whole existence is one spiritual family. That's the only way for anyone to practice non-violence in its most comprehensive definition. And then the verse tells you that such persons reach the highest level of spiritual evolution. That's the idea behind. So, as a part of our spiritual evolution, any person may begin his spiritual life by doing something good. Of course, prayer, meditation, reading scriptures are really wonderful, very helpful, very important, but it should have an effect on our mind, on our attitude. You cannot say I'm a devotee of God, so I can do whatever I want. Then it's better to be an atheist, to be very frank. So Swami Vivekananda, Vivekananda is the name of a monk who founded this organization of which the Vedanta Society is a branch. He once stated a very, very, very powerful statement he made. You live your life in such a way that God accepts you even if you do not accept Him. So God's existence as an ontological reality is not dependent upon our certificate or our faith or our belief in His existence. So, if we live our life in such a way, then we automatically become good devotees of God. So that's why he says, when we see samam pashyanki sarvatra samavastamisham, everywhere you see the divine, the presence of the Lord. Then every action becomes sacred as an act of worship. Every word also becomes sacred like a prayer. Again, this is a state that we reach eventually. It's not something, well, I believe, so I practice tomorrow onwards. It may not be possible, but one can always start a journey anytime, any day, by trying to think, trying to speak, trying to do good, noble things which don't do any harm to others, which won't hurt anyone. So, these are two well-known verses. Frequently, men like Gandhi, Aurobindo, Dr. Radhakrishnan, some of the great, and Swami Vivekananda, the great monk, many of the great teachers of India considered these two verses as among the most profound and the most relevant teachings of this great book. Because if we become spiritual persons, that spirituality should reflect in our attitude, in our action, in our thought, in our word, in our overall outlook towards life, our own interpretation of life. And now we are going to the 29th verse. Prakrteva jakarmani kriyamanani sarvashaha yapasyadita atmanam akartaram sapasyadi. It says, a spiritual person realizes that all actions, all activities are Their activities of our instruments. So what it means is, our true nature is Atman. This Atman is unchanging. It doesn't get involved in anything. But this Atman, when joined with samskaras, tendencies, actions, then we do different things. So a true spiritual person can remain detached. He can work hard if he does everything that is possible to help others. If he doesn't get gratitude, then he won't worry, he won't be disappointed, because he does everything as an act of worship. And when we do anything as an act of worship, there are two important elements involved here. On the one hand, we do with all concentration, with all sense of sanctity and sacredness, with all attention, we do that. That's one element. The second element is, we don't expect anything in return. So these are two important factors that characterize any noble action. We are fully focused on what we are doing. Our whole mind is concentrated on what we are doing. We do it with all a sense of sanctity and sacredness, devotion, dedication, full involvement. At the same time, we do not have any selfish desire. So because we do not have any selfish desire, we can remain detached. You can find such examples in the lives of many people, not only among mystics, saints and sages, but even among great men of higher ideals, great leaders, political leaders, great social reformers. You can find, on the one hand, total dedication. On the other hand, having absolutely no selfish desire. The one person who I frequently quote is Gandhi. The reason why I'm quoting Gandhi is, Gandhi was a politician. If you read his life, you find most of the time he was running a campaign, a political campaign against colonials, and that's what he was doing all the time. But he's also considered to be one of the greatest spiritual human beings, by no less than a person than even Albert Einstein said, for centuries to come, people will hardly believe that such a man ever walked on this earth. This statement from no less a person than Albert Einstein himself. So, Gandhi, what was Gandhi doing? He was reading the Bhagavad Gita, which he considered like his mother. So, he was doing whatever he did, including political agitations, including writings. His complete works of Gandhi will run into almost 92 volumes, maybe 90 volumes, huge works. So he wrote so much, spoke so much, walking all over the country, agitation, but at the same time with total detachment. So how can you be active all the time? That too, not sitting in a cave or a monastery, or a temple or a church, but in the middle of streets, running campaigns, leading agitations, and still being spiritual. So what it says, that idea is implied here. Whatever I do as my duty, as a sacred act of performance of my own duty and responsibility, my own obligation, which I do with all concentration. At the same time, with zero desires. You may have intentions and plans, but no selfish desire. Without plans, without some programs, you may not be able to do anything in this world. But at the same time, you can plan everything properly. You can have a proper plan for everything. You consult experts and specialists. And you do all this, and then you're fully involved. But at the same time, you're totally detached. If we can do that, one can do great things in this world. Because when we get involved, it's difficult to remain detached. We get attached. So, but if we can really practice the detachment, we can save a lot of physical energy, a lot of fatigue, exhaustion. When we do something and we feel all the time we have done a lot of things, then we become tired. That's the idea behind. So, when we become involved, sometimes we may have a selfish desire to enjoy the fruits of our labor, our work. That creates problems. That creates anxieties, worries. And that's the natural consequence of selfish desire. So if one can completely avoid all selfish desires, at the same time work with great enthusiasm and efficiency, then life can be a very wonderful experience. So that's the idea mentioned in this 29th verse. Prakritevacha karmani kriyamanani sarvasya. Means this world, our obligations, our duties, our demands, social, cultural demands and responses, and our own ability, our responsibility to do things, all are there. No, we can't help it. But at the same time, I am by nature not this slave of action or slave of the results of action. I am Atman, the divine. So we can always identify ourselves with the divine element that is present in us and not the worldly element like desires, plans, ambitions. All this we may have, but essentially we should identify ourselves with this divinity within. So that's why Swami Vivekananda defined religion as spirituality, and when religion is defined as spirituality, then religion, in his own words, is a manifestation of perfection present in all of us. That is spirituality. Manifestation of perfection means divinity. Manifestation of divinity present in all of us. Religion is a manifestation of divinity present in all of us. So these are the three important verses that we plan to discuss today. About this difficult to fully understand. I can try to explain this further, this 29th verse, because it has a lot of practical relevance in our own times. See, in modern times, we define success in life in terms of material success, in terms of achievements of the objects of desire, objects of enjoyments. But frequently what happens, after achieving a lot of things, we are reduced to psychological wrecks. We don't have the psychological health to enjoy the fruits of our own labor. This is true with large number of people, and not only those who succeed, but if you look at the data, you find very unfortunately quite a sizable percentage of the total population suffer from depression, anxiety, neurosis, or other related problems. A very saddening fact. That means a very good percentage of young people become victims of anxiety, neurosis, depression, and so on. Because that's in front of us, there is this ideal of life, success, somehow to make money and succeed. Now, we can't just run away from the challenges and demands of society. Money, wealth, status, job, all these are indispensable, absolutely unavoidable. We can't deny the reality that they are important in our life. But along with that, we can remember that this success defined in terms of material wealth and enjoyments is not really a success. At the end of it, the successful person doesn't have the mental health to enjoy the results of the products, the fruits of his own labor. So, this text, which we are going to discuss in the coming sessions, this text tells you that, well, you work hard. You work hard and achieve whatever you want. You can reach, the sky is the limit. Everything is wonderful. But at the same time, remember, all these things are impermanent, including the money that we make, our health, and all that we desire and we achieve. They may be necessary, but they won't last for all times. It is something we all know. Even every businessman knows that he can't take his checkbook and fountain pen when he leaves this world. Everyone knows. But still, if a billionaire loses $1 million, he can't sleep. And that sleeplessness can reduce his longevity, affect his health also. He knows that, but we can't get out of this. A kind of invisible trap or prison. So Bhagavad Gita tells you that work hard, achieve all that you want, but remember, material success alone cannot give us permanent happiness or permanent contentment. So once we remember, then when we are working hard for success, we will remind ourselves, we will caution ourselves, well, I should not go beyond the limits. So the result is a peculiar kind of level-headedness, a sense of balance. Again, I repeat, it doesn't mean that we should retreat from the realities of life, or that we should close our eyes and try to go and somewhere sit in a hermitage. Not really speaking. That's not what Gandhi did. Maybe if you ask anyone, those who have studied Gandhi's life, maybe, I don't know, in 20th century, maybe he must have been one of the hardest working human beings. He slept only for 4 hours. 4 hours. He slept only for 4 hours in his life. And this man was walking in the tropical sun. You have to go to India during July, August to enjoy the heat. And he was walking all over the country, leading agitations. All that he was doing with total detachment. So what do you mean? Now, a little bit of this can be practiced by businessmen, by students, by professionals, even in the 21st century. I mean, the idea that we all know intellectually. Everyone knows that money and wealth do not last long. A day will come when you have to leave everything behind. Even a crematorium manager will collapse if you tell him you are not going to live eternally. Every day he is witnessing human bodies being burnt to ashes. But if he doesn't want to remember, he may remember, but our remembrance doesn't translate into a philosophical, spiritual level-headedness. So what Gita tells you is that work hard, achieve everything, but remember all these things are impermanent. Impermanent is not non-existent, means they don't last for all time, which we all know intellectually, but our intellectual conviction and understanding doesn't become a kind of intellectual, a real emotional common sense. It doesn't help us, worries and anxieties and depressions, these problems. So that is the implication of this 29th verse. We will continue our discussion in the coming weeks. So next week we can have interaction. Normally after this lecture we will have a short Q&A or question answer session, interaction. You are most welcome to ask questions.
Hari Om Swamiji.
Yeah. Very please.
In the Bhagavad Gita, it talks about doing without expecting the result and being in a constant state of action. In chapter 13, and specifically in the beginning, it talks about kshetra, the field, and then
Can you repeat once more? Beginning of 13th chapter?
It talks about kshetra.
Shraddha. Oh yeah.
Then it talks, so the field, and then the knower of the field. And then throughout chapter 13 following that, it emphasizes upon
So your question is, you see, the point is, Shraddha involves total concentration, dedication, involvement. At the same time, how can we practice detachment, lack of desire? How can we reduce desire when we are fully involved or engaged? That's what you are asking?
It's talking about, or how I perceive it to be I perceive it that it's talking about...
you can remove your mask, then it becomes clear, So this man, when you ask question,
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, please.
It talks about exacerbating upon, it talks about the field in the beginning of chapter 13, and then the knower of the field, and how I perceive the field, and then the knower of the field. And I think the Sanskrit term is kshetra?
Shraddha.
Okay, and then kshaj, is it, there's jnanam, and then is the J pronounced the same? Kshajyana? Kshajyana? I don't know. But it's the knower of the field. So what I perceive to be the Purusha and the Prakriti, the whole composition of the human, is what 25 through 29 is discussing, like in a more abstract form. Would that be safe to assume?
What it says, this 27, 28, 27 and 28 verse. These verses they describe the state of a person, of an individual, who has reached this highest knowledge. That is called kshetraknya. Kshetraknyayor jnanam means a proper understanding of the distinction between the field and the knower of the field. The one who knows that all these are material things, I am distinct and different from these material things. These are field or kshetram. I am kshetraknya, Purusha, that's my true nature. So when a person reaches this level of intuitive knowledge, spiritual experience, then he realizes the presence of the same divinity everywhere. So there is samam pashyanhi sarvatra. Such a person sees the same everywhere. So you can find in our spiritual journey, when you advance further and further, one thing that happens is we become more and more broad. And this breadth of vision is because the compassion and understanding of our mind, we may not technically interpret it as, let's say, like Gita, same divinity everywhere. But no, it's slow. What happens, slowly you find these, the dividing barriers, they fall down. All the lines of demarcation begin to disappear. As we become more and more broad-minded, we start seeing the whole humanity as our own spiritual family. This is the highest state. But anyone who practices, even begins with the preliminary disciplines of spiritual life, may go to church, synagogue, temple, pray, puja, worship, reading scriptures, great scriptural statements. If you read, they find if you sincerely do that, slowly you become better human beings. And this is an inevitable process. Anyone who practices any spiritual discipline with proper saddha, proper concentration, will invariably evolve, start moving forward. And this moving forward happens when we become more and more broad-minded. All the barriers, all these lines of demarcations disappear. So what happens to such a person is described in this 27th and 28th verse. 29th verse is telling you that such a person will understand, well, I am the divine. All these actions are going on, but he remain detached. A kind of philosophical level-headedness and wisdom. Clear to you?
Yeah, I think that goes back to your point. In both dualistic and non-dualistic Vaishnavism, it talks about...
Excuse me?
In both dual and non-dual Vaishnavism, it talks about God... knowingly or unknowingly, you're doing the work of God. You're a devotee of God. And you mentioned that in the Advaita concepts. It's also in dualistic Vaishnav Hinduism.
True. No, I understand. See, dualism or Dvaita, dualism, it understands God in his highest form as God with form and attributes, certain characteristics. That is fully accepted and appreciated by non-dualists. But they tell you that as you evolve further, then you find that the divinity is present within you, the divinity is present within everyone. Then you will be able to feel the presence of God even outside the temple. That's the idea behind it.
In my travels to India, I'm sorry, I'll stop talking in just a moment. But in my travels to India, I visited a vast amount of temples. That was my primary. That was my premise for my travels. And on every temple, regardless of what it was, the Vipassana pagoda, if it was in Mathura, no matter where it was, somewhere in Varanasi, in Benares. At the Benares Hindu University, the temple there. In every temple, written in some beautiful marble, carved marble, it would say that God is not found in temples. God is not found.
Not found.
In temples.
God is not found in temples.
Yeah, in every temple, somewhere on the temple.
In the temple,
Mathura,
Hindu philosophy is so wide. Hindu philosophy accommodates dualism, which tells you God is present only in the temple, and also non-dualism, which tells you that God is an all-pervading divinity. So you find, and not only another interesting thing, all these non-dualist philosophers were going to temples every day. They were also practicing worship every day. This is an important thing. All those who wrote non-dualist works, classical works, they were also practicing meditation, worship, reading scriptures, because non-dualism doesn't reject dualism. It goes beyond dualism. So you may have a PhD, it doesn't mean that you should not read books which are meant for primary school students. So that's an interesting thing. And this is a very important point to remember. All these great non-dualist philosophers were great devotees of God. They were praying every day. They were worshipping every day. That's why when they, you can find men like Vivekananda and Gandhi, they looked upon Jesus Christ as one of Hindu sages, because they didn't know anything much about that. So anyone who practices any kind of spiritual discipline, that person is divine. That's the idea behind it. Yeah, that's the idea behind it. That's the breadth and the universality of this vision of life. Thank you. Thank you for the questions. Yeah.
Swamiji, how do you
Could you remove your mask if you don't mind? Yeah.
How do you reconcile the concept of ahimsa with Arjuna on the battle? Arjuna not wanting to go to battle, and Sri Krishna sort of convincing that situation.
Yeah. Of course, that's so. There are two answers. Many of the classical commentators have interpreted the whole scene as some kind of a symbolism. The war is happening in our hearts and between two types of tendencies, good and bad tendencies. This is one interpretation. But coming back to the story itself, please listen. Now you see, the whole story, Arjuna was by nature a warrior. I mean, that was his profession. Now, there was a quarrel, there was a conflict between the same family, the children of two members of the same family, Pandu and Dhritarashtra. So, it so happened that one group, numerically they were superior, they took away all the wealth, all the properties of the other group, Pandavas. And not only that, they also did a lot of harm to women folk, and a lot of terrible things like, criminal activities the Kauravas did. So, Arjuna was by nature well known as a warrior. But when he saw in front of him many people who were his own cousins related to him, he felt a doubt, is it proper for me to fight with them? Naturally, it comes to every sensible person to fight. But then Krishna told him, if we don't fight, you know what will happen? So many people will be killed. So many women will become widows. So many, they will lose their children, they will lose their husbands. Terrible things will happen. So, Lord Krishna told him, he was not a saint, but he pretended to be a saint. So told him, you are by nature a soldier. It is your duty to do your job to protect the poor and the women folk. I frequently, this question is raised in many platforms, but there are quite a few answers. One answer that I repeated many times is, in 1938, there's a treaty between Neville Chamberlain and Hitler. So many of my listeners have heard this again. And the treaty was that Hitler promised that he won't attack. And Neville Chamberlain, he made a fool of himself, as history later showed. So because of that treaty, what happened? Hitler was emboldened. And within a few months, he attacked Czechoslovakia and Poland. And he also signed a secret treaty with Joseph Stalin. It is called Ribbentrop-Molotov Treaty, which actually began the Second World War. So, you remember, that was Arjuna's position. Arjuna was trying to act like Neville Chamberlain, the British Prime Minister, who thought, we have achieved peace in our generation. But it didn't last even a few weeks. So Hitler got emboldened to start this blood path because of Neville Chamberlain. So Lord Krishna tells Arjuna, almost same, shockingly similar. He says, if you don't do your duty, you know what is going to happen? The blood of these thousands of people will be in your hands. You'll be responsible for the killing, for the destruction of property, for all the problems, all the tragedies which are going to happen. You'll be responsible. Because of your inaction, all this happened. Then Arjuna suddenly understood. So if a policeman or a soldier stands as a guard in a school to protect the children from crooks, from violent terrorists, Oh, I should not practice violence, so I should get away. What should you do? If he doesn't do that, many hundreds will suffer. So this is of course, I give this 1938 treaty, I give a classical example of, and the absolute, effeminacy that led to a terrible event in world history. Okay? Yeah. Okay, thank you for the question. Something related to history. What is the question you are under to ask? Yeah. Please go ahead. Yeah.
I was just curious, like Arjuna's duty or his Swadharma is to be a warrior.
Yeah.
So how does one find what their duty
Yeah,
or
Swadharma.
is?
Yeah, that's a, yeah. No, Swadharma is a very profound term. What it means, something that you are supposed to do by virtue of your education, your qualification, your fitness, your social position. Suppose you are a teacher, your Swadharma is to teach. You are a student, your Swadharma is to study. Like that. So, all of us in our mind know what our Swadharma is. So, the one proof that you can check whether it's your Swadharma or not. When you do something, you feel a kind of inner gratification, sense of fulfillment. I have done what I should have done. In Sanskrit, it's called kridarthada, kritagrittida. The feeling, well, I have done what I ought to have done. And that helps you. Actually, that feeling even reduces BP, anxiety, all that. When you feel, well, you have done something that you should have done. All the great men and women in the world did great things because they generated a lot of spiritual asset, spiritual feeling, by doing what they thought was the best thing they could do. This is Swadharma. Okay, thank you. So I think we had a very interesting question answer session. So we'll continue the same discussion next week. Thank you. Namaskar. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.